recording? Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Transitioning from one to the other. It's wonderful to see you all. To those of you who are part of TBZ and are here, were with us this morning for our Shabbat services, wonderful that you can continue being here. For you, also for TBZ members who just arrived, it makes it feel very much like TBZ when you can arrive for Kiddush when we have a wonderful Kiddush talk, and we love that. And for those of you who are not part of our TBZ community, I give you a warm welcome this Shabbat. It's wonderful that you could be with us. So we could invite you for this Kiddush talk. Before COVID, we will have regular Kiddush talks here during Kiddush. That's why they're called Kiddush talks. While we have our luncheon after Shabbat services, we will bring our food to the room and eat together and connect together around some meaningful conversation. And always in February, as part of the month about Jewish Disability and Inclusion Month, we have had for many years now a speaker or a program to honor and to celebrate this month and this moment. So first, I want to express my incredible gratitude to the Ruderman Foundation, specifically to the Ruderman Synagogue Inclusion Project, that has been an important, there's not enough words to express how important it's been in helping the Jewish community in the Boston area and in the country to really think about inclusion and disability in ways that we are right now. And my enormous gratitude beyond words to the director of the Ruderman Synagogue Inclusion Project, who happens to be, we're so blessed, dear TBZ member, Molly Silver. Molly, I don't have enough words to express the gratitude to you, to your work, to the Ruderman Foundation. So please pass this along to the Ruderman family, to the Ruderman Foundation, to the Inclusion Project for all this amazing work. When I look at what TBZ has accomplished in the last 5 years since we started all this, I am amazed. I am amazed. So really, it is thanks to you and to the work and to have you have challenges and lift us up to do this work. My next gratitude is to the TBZ Inclusion Committee. I don't want to mention everybody because then I'll leave somebody out and then that won't be inclusive. So I will mention the chairs, Dania Handelsman and Sue Brent, who have been amazing chairs in our community. And just if you're not aware of all the things we have done at TBZ, all the work that we have made together, we made this space physically accessible. Almost, we still have things to do. We have not in the perfect place, but we moved so fast on doing that. And I know you might not remember that because you haven't been here, but remember we put that lifts, chairs with arms, we made it inclusive for those who have challenge with attention, with fidget tools, quiet spaces. We were working already right just before college and setting standards for every meeting and for every class and every gathering so people of all abilities and challenge could come to all our programs. So really, we have been in this journey, and in the last couple of years, we have been focusing specifically around issues around mental health. And with COVID, of course, this has become center priority in how we think about inclusion. So I want to tell anybody that is here from our TBZ community that if you are at any time interested to get involved in this work, please let me know, let Dania or Sue know, or our president, Sarah Smalover. If you can't remember who to email, just write president@tbzbrooklyn.org or ravclaudia@tbzbrooklyn.org. And we will glad to bring you into this very important work. So before we begin, a couple of logistics that I would like to ask you. We want to encourage you, if you can, if it feels comfortable to you, to have your camera on. and to be present in this valuable program. I know we're zoomed out and we have learned to do multitasking during these Zoom programs, and at the same time, and I recognize that, and at the same time, we really want to create as much as possible a space of all being together. So if you are eating or you are cooking and making lunch at the same time or going for a walk at the same time, we're happy to see that space. Just if it feels comfortable for you to have your camera on, we really want to encourage you to have your camera on. And second is, there is too many people here to have a dialogue and a conversation. It's not possible in Zoom. We have also disabled the chat for everybody to not make it distracting for people, but we will be very happy to get your questions at any point. Dr. Willard, which I'll introduce in a moment, will be happy to try to respond to your questions. So we encourage you to post your questions either to Dania, which is one of our co-hosts in the chat, or directly to Dr. Willard in the chat. So if you have any question during the program, please use the chat to do that. And when we end the program, Dania will be closing up for us this wonderful program. So now I get to introduce our esteemed guest, Dr. Christopher Willard, a psychologist and educational consultant based in Boston, specializing in mindfulness. He has been practicing meditation for 20 years and has led hundreds of workshops around the world with invitations to more than 2,000 countries. He currently serves on the board of directors of the Institute of Meditation and Psychotherapy and is the president of the Mindfulness in Education Network. He has presented at TEDx conference, and his thoughts have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, mindful.org, and elsewhere. He's the author of Child's Mind, Growing Up Mindful, Raising Resilience, and 8 other books for parents, professionals, and children, along with 6 sets of cards and therapeutic games available in more than 10 languages. He teaches at the Harvard Medical School. On the personal side, he enjoys traveling, hiking, cooking, reading and writing, and being a father. Dr. Willard, we are very, very honored to welcome you at TBZ. You sound really as a TBZer. We like all these things, mindfulness and psychology, and being together in community and singing. Mindfulness is part of the way we approach our services and our ritual practice. So you are really the right fit to be with us today. And I'm very, very grateful and welcome you here virtually. God willing, one day we'll welcome you here.
Thank you so much. And having grown up in the area, I actually have, 30 years ago, have been there for many a bar and bat mitzvah, having grown up locally. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you to the Ruderman Foundation. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Danya. Thank you, everybody. Mara, thank you. Everybody who is involved in having me here. So I'm excited to be here just sharing a little bit about some mental health tips, knowing that this is an incredibly difficult time in terms of mental health for so many of us. And if not for us, then certainly for a lot of folks that we care about, whether that's relatives who are isolated, whether it's our own children, whether it's friends near, friends far, and just so aware of the impact of this just incredibly stressful pandemic that we're all living in. I really appreciate the introduction, which is extensive, and some of you, actually I'm seeing some friends in the audience. Thanks for showing up, by the way. Nice to see some familiar faces. But also wanting to, just describe a bit of who I am. So I am a clinical psychologist by training, and I've got this long-standing interest in mindfulness in particular. So the talk today will weave a little bit of mindfulness through, which I know is something that probably some of us are familiar with. But what we increasingly have these days is all kinds of wonderful research on the ways that mindfulness can be helpful for stress, for anxiety, for depression, for addiction, for so many other issues, even in terms of physical health that we and folks that we care about in the community might be struggling with. So I do this work sharing mindfulness, and I never, I kind of got interested in mindfulness maybe in my early 20s. And I'm aware that I look like I'm about 15 years old, but the good news is that mindfulness keeps you young, basically. I can put that out there. But just having these sweet memories, I grew up in the area, I grew up in Newton, going to Drumlin Farm Camp when I was a little kid, and just walking in nature, right, as silently as I could. Right, the counselor saying, walk as quietly as you can. And many years later, when I was actually struggling with my own mental health issues, I looked back and was thinking about, that was really mindful walking, or just listening to all the sounds in the forest. And maybe the counselors were just trying to get us to be quiet because we were a bunch of rowdy kids. But again, that was really a mindful listening practice. Or being with my dad out at a pond in Concord and looking up at the clouds in the sky. And I remember him saying, and if you pick a cloud and you just breathe, you can actually make the cloud disappear with your mind. And it felt like this incredible magic trick when I was a kid. But of course, years later, kind of realizing, of course, the cloud's going to disappear, right? Whatever I do. But these sweet moments that I remember having, what I'm going to just ask you to reflect on are like, what are some of those moments for you? Perhaps growing up, or perhaps as an adult in your 20s, moments when you felt good, moments when you felt in the moment, right? These kinds of moments that maybe you've gotten more of in the pandemic, or maybe a lot less of, feeling less alive in some ways. And so I'll be weaving this idea of mindfulness. I could get into a whole definition, but I want to really give you some more useful tips. But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about when I talk about mindfulness. And so this pandemic, of course, has been a tremendous challenge to all of us. I think we're certainly well aware of that. And, some of the things I've been struck by were, I remember it was last March, actually I had just gotten home from a trip, like right before the pandemic hit. And it was Friday the 13th when things started to shut down here. The first Friday the 13th, actually, in 2020, I don't know if anyone noticed that 2020 was so bad that we had two Friday the 13th. But it was that first Friday the 13th, and I was feeling very lucky to be in my yard with the kids. They were 2 and 5 at that point. And, this is when we thought it was going to be 2 weeks of a shutdown, right? How wrong we were. And thinking, saying to my wife, I said, the kids are always going to remember this time. And my wife just looked at me and kind of rolled her eyes and said, Chris, everyone's going to remember this time. Now, I should tell you, my wife is a medical historian. Her job is to actually study plagues and pandemics and how they alter the course of history. So she's very popular right now. But thinking about, what is this time? How do I want to remember this time? And how do I want to be remembered during this time? By my kids, by my clients, by the communities that I'm a part of? And not just what do I want to do during this time, but really, how and who do I want to be during this time? And it's impacted us all so differently. I certainly remember at the very beginning, right? Many friends were like, I'm going to learn 5 languages and I'm going to, bicycle a marathon on my Peloton. And I'm thinking, well, I've got work and I've got kids. That's not going to happen for me. But again, really thinking like, not just what do I want to do, but who do I want to be? And Jon Kabat-Zinn, a great mindfulness teacher, says, how can we become, rather than human doings, how can we become human beings again? Right? Who do we want to be during this time? What kind of opportunity can this be for growth and self-examination? And I think some of us felt, fearful, but also some optimism at the start of this, right? That maybe through this incredibly difficult experience, we could grow. And I do want to talk about the ways that we can grow and be more resilient and stronger through really challenging experiences like this. And it's something also I certainly think a lot about in terms of, people who've experienced hardship, and thinking about the Jewish people and the growth, right, through hardship as well. How do we make meaning? Right? Viktor Frankl, right? Survivor of the Holocaust, right? Talks about man's search for meaning, right? What is it that gives us meaning, that can keep us going and help us to really thrive, even in the face of adversity, right? He went on to become an incredible humanistic psychologist and really influencing the whole field, and certainly one of my favorite authors, and kind of a mindfulness guy too, actually. So who do I want to be during this time has become something of a reflection for me. Because what we know is that all of this isolation is impacting us in all these ways in terms of our mental health. I was giving a talk early on, and I remember asking an audience, if I asked you to describe a depressed person, what would you say? And people in the Zoom were typing in the chat, staying at home all day, sleeping at weird hours, never getting out of my pajamas, eating at strange times, isolating, not talking to people, just being on my screen all day, right? And then I said, well, what's your pandemic life look like? And people said, oh, right. So that one of the things that this pandemic has done is it's forced us to act like we are depressed people. And what we increasingly know in terms of mental health, there's this wonderful kind of phrase, you can't always think your way into a new way of acting, but you can act your way into a new way of thinking and being. And unfortunately, what started to happen, especially at the beginning of this pandemic, and really for many of us who are still isolated because of age or because of illness or because of compromised immune systems, is it has forced us to continue to act like we are depressed. And then guess what? We become depressed. And we become more anxious. And we become more withdrawn, and maybe we turn to addiction, whatever that looks like for each of us, right? Whether that's drugs and alcohol, whether that's other behaviors, or whether that's food, or whether that's, right, so many other things that we can fall into. And that isolation, of course, as well, impacts us. What's beautiful about being here today is that we've got 100-some people who are actively making the effort to be a part of a community. And that's actually going to be one of the best things that you can do for your mental health, and to try to pull those folks who you're worried about, to pull them into community. And I'll start to talk a little bit about why that's so important. But I do just want to also talk about, this isolation is not so good, right? Hopefully we've got bubbles or maybe some people around, whether it's online or off, some healthy groups of people, because one of the things that's actually really powerful about positive emotions, and there's so much incredible research coming from positive psychology on this idea of emotional contagions. Actually, through what are called our mirror neurons, which are located kind of here on the sides of our brain, we actually can infect people with our emotions. Walking into a room, we can actually lift that room up or bring it down. I think a Zoom room too, probably. and likewise, we can be brought down by others. So the research on this, to me, is really interesting, especially when it comes to mindfulness and regulating our emotions. In families, we know that when a parent is practicing mindfulness, the communication is better, family happiness goes up, there's fewer accidents in the home. We know that in the workplace, this starts to translate, right? Happy bosses lead to more happy employees, right? This is why leadership makes such a difference in terms of a corporate culture, online and off, politically and otherwise, right? Or in communities, right? When we think about the leaders of this particular community, right? Really setting the tone. And it really does set the tone. A really interesting study I saw last year was roommates in college. When one of them is practicing mindfulness, right? 1 week on, 1 week off, the other roommate actually says that they're happier that week that the roommate's practicing mindfulness, even if they don't know that the roommate is doing that, which is incredible, right? This helps us, my job being a therapist in my day job, right? Doctors, right? Lawyers, so many other people finding mindfulness to be helpful for them as well as the folks around them, and couples who live together also, right? Greater trust in each other, better communication with each other, fewer negative interactions when one person's practicing mindfulness, and a bit happier. So it can actually really start with us and start to then trickle out. And I think it's so hard right? We can feel so powerless when there's someone else that we worry about with mental health issues. And I know surely in this audience, we are not the ones who are identifying as the person, although some of us are too. But how powerless it feels to love someone, care about someone who is really struggling. But in fact, one of the best things that we can do really is to care for ourselves, right? The old classic, put your oxygen on mask first, right, before the person sitting next to you. Right? But it really does, the way we care for ourselves really does then set the tone for the folks around us to start to look for help or to feel supported, to feel seen, to feel validated, to feel heard. Those are the best things we can do for folks who are really struggling, who we care about. And it does start to, as I said, trickle out, ripple out as well. So we think about, I'm interested in kind of the latest theories on mental health. And of course, when I was growing up, it was always, is it nature or nurture? Right? What is it that creates mental health, or what is it that creates mental illness? And what we increasingly look at now are what we might call three parts: the biopsychosocial model of both mental illness and mental thriving. What does that mean? Biological, right? Well, that's our genetics, right? To some extent, that's what we eat, how we care for ourselves physically, sleeping, right? Getting exercise, things like that. That's the biological. The psychological is, how do our brains work? At the most superficial, are we an optimist or are we a pessimist? Right? That's going to change how we perceive the world, how we think things through, whether we interpret things as bad or good, dangerous, sad, depressing, or something to run away from and blunt with drugs or alcohol or something like that. And then lastly, the social, bio, psycho, and social. What does the social mean? Well, that means our community. That means our friends. It means our families. It means the 107 other people in this virtual Zoom room together and everybody else in our spiritual community. Reaching out to them, staying connected to them. We've been learning from positive psychology that actually the more friends you have, the longer you live. The healthier you are physically, the healthier you are mentally. So community is medicine. It really, really is. Whether that's a spiritual community or a work community or a family community or a common interest of some kind. So what I want to start to turn toward are how can we bring a bit more mindfulness and awareness to each of these, to our bodies, the bio, to our minds, maybe not the psycho, but the psychological, let's say, and the social. How can we strengthen each of these so that we really are able to thrive and to find ways to support these in those folks who we love, who we do worry about, who we do care about? Well, in terms of our bodies, there's a few basics, right? Taking medication, continuing to take medication, making sure the people that you love and care about are getting their medication, maybe setting up delivery or something like that. Some folks really need healthy prescribed medication for their depression, for their anxiety, for whatever else might be going on for them. Eating as healthfully as possible, getting exercise, getting sleep, and trying to stay away from substances, right? Especially if that can be a bit of a dangerous road for some folks. And the good news is that there are so many support groups online for actually anything, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, and certainly 12-step meetings and other substance recovery meetings. Those kinds of things have gone online and are a really great way to stay connected, or encourage people to stay connected. So in terms of caring for our bodies, and of course I'm going to bring mindfulness in here because that's what I do, right? Getting a little bit of exercise, which is kind of tough right now in February, right? It was a lot easier last June and July, right? If we felt safe getting outside. But 20 minutes of light exercise, 20 minutes of light exercise, 4-5 times a week, that's as good as medication for mild to moderate anxiety, for mild to moderate depression, for helping us get the sleep that we need, and actually for boosting our brains to focus a little bit better, because I think so many of us just feel like we can't even pay attention. In fact, I can't believe you're all here voluntarily on Zoom on a Saturday. I can't even, like that I feel grateful and honored about, because who wants to be on Zoom on a Saturday? I hope I'm worth your time, right? In the winter, maybe that's harder, right? Most of us don't want to go to the gym, right? But finding things like online workouts or working out with friends, right? Getting a Peloton or an exercise bike. I'm actually, I won't show it to you, but under my desk, I've got one of those kind of dorky treadmills that goes under your desk so I can exercise while I'm writing, right? Doing yoga classes online. I've got kids, actually. We do some online yoga classes inside. That's been really great. And just moving, I know I kind of briefly touched on mindful walking. Mindful walking is really just being aware of the fact that we're walking. It is a little bit like that childhood experience at Drum One Farm of, right, putting one foot down in front of the next. And if you're trying to not make a sound, like when I was 7 or 8 or whatever, right, I'm only focusing on the soles of my feet, not thinking about the past or the future or anything else. So maybe just taking some time to slow down, just to walk, just feeling your feet on the ground, noticing the surfaces of the ice, of the snow, of the cement, of wherever it is that you're walking. We certainly know that getting out in nature, again, if it's possible for you to leave your house, and I know that's not possible, especially, when we think about, equity and accessibility. But we know that getting out in nature can be wonderfully healing for us, right? Being in the woods, it's been amazing getting out with my family, seeing the trails filled up, seeing so many people walking around Walden Pond, seeing so many people in the wonderful parks that we have near us here in Massachusetts, right? But this can be great if you're able and feel safe getting outside. Even just moving a little bit more slowly, I've found to be helpful. I was bringing some groceries in a number of months ago and doing that thing where I carry like 10 bags at once. And I was like, I'm not in a rush. I can just carry 2 bags at a time and I just enjoy the movement here. Walking also, and just, I'm used to traveling a lot for work. Certainly just walking around my neighborhood in Cambridge these days is about as far as I get to any kind of exotic location, but I've gotten to have this greater intimacy with my own neighborhood. Noticing the birds are different in the morning than they are in the evening. One day it smells a little bit different and a new flower is blossoming in my neighborhood. These kinds of things are bringing more mindful awareness just to the simple act of walking. And a wonderful study from positive psychology actually suggested, I had this group of college kids, because I was experimenting on college kids, divided them into 3 groups. The first group, they said, take a walk for 20 minutes a day for 2 weeks. The second group, they said, take a walk for 20 minutes a day and notice all the ugly things. Notice all the garbage, the rats, right? The third group, they said, notice all the beautiful things, smell the roses, smell the flowers, see the sunshine. Measured their mood before and afterwards, and not surprisingly, they came back 2 weeks later. The first group, take a walk, they felt a little bit better. Getting exercise helped. The second group, they felt a bit worse, looking at all the garbage and everything. It's gonna give you a bad attitude. The third group, noticing the beautiful, they definitely felt better. And they called everybody back 6 months later to see how they were doing. In the group that had just taken a walk, they went back to their baseline. The group that had noticed the negative, they went back to the baseline. But the group that had noticed the beauty in the world, they'd gone closer to their baseline, but they were still a little bit further up. So whether you're walking, driving, or just looking out your window, just notice the beautiful. And it shifts our mind a bit toward the positive. When I don't do Zoom, I do phone calls, and doing phone calls while I walk is a way to get a little bit of exercise, right? These kinds of things can start to make a difference. We can bring more awareness to eating and trying to eat healthfully, and that doesn't mean you have to be perfect about it. When we're under stress, the body's stress response is called the fight or flight, or fight, flee, or faint response. And if you're running away from something because of stress, you're probably not craving kale, right? In fact, you're probably not ever craving kale, even when you're in a great mood, right? We crave, when we're stressed out, we crave junk food, we crave sugar, we crave salt, we crave fat, right? That's actually normal. And that's why maybe our eating habits haven't been entirely healthy, but just being aware of that can help us to make slightly different choices. Again, don't have to be perfect. We're just thinking, what are some slightly different choices that we can make? And I know I teach mindfulness, and so again, some folks in the audience are familiar with the exercise where we eat a raisin for a half an hour. Not everybody is, but that's something one does in a mindfulness class oftentimes. I don't feel like I have time for that in my life, to eat a raisin for a half an hour every day. But bringing a bit more awareness to eating and the kind of food I'm eating brings more joy, which lifts up my mood, reduces my anxiety, and then maybe I'm probably making some healthier choices too when I just slow down a little bit. A few years ago, I wrote an article, and I'll just share my screen here, about more mindful eating as opposed to perfectly mindful eating. Mindless eating is eating past full, ignoring our body's signals. Mindful eating, just listening to our body, stopping when we're full. Mindlessly eating because our emotions tell us to eat. We're sad, we're bored, we're lonely, we're anxious, versus more mindfully, our body's stomach is growling, energy is low, telling us to eat. Mindlessly just sort of eating at random, grazing, more mindfully trying to eat with others at a set time and place. Again, don't have to be perfect about this, but just keeping this in mind. Mindlessly just emotionally comforting foods versus more mindfully nutritious foods. Mindless, the eating and multitasking thing, which is hard not to do these days, versus when we're eating, just eating. And lastly, mindlessly just considering a meal to be an end product in some ways versus thinking about where food comes from. And that's actually been an incredible thing about this pandemic, is I feel so much more aware of and grateful for, right, the folks working at my supermarket, the people working at the factories, the people who are in many ways risking their lives to bring us the food to our tables, right, so that we can eat. And it helps us to feel more connected when we think about how close we actually are to the food chain on all those levels. So I encourage you to just bear that in mind before you take that bite or whatever it might be. Or even just maybe a few bites of a meal, just slowing down and really enjoying and appreciating, or something that maybe something we have to drink. I sometimes share this meme I saw online. It says there's this guy at the coffee shop sitting at a table, not on his phone, not on a laptop, just drinking his coffee like a psychopath. And hopefully none of us are in coffee shops these days, but I think you get the idea. Maybe we can just slow down and just really enjoy a few bites of a meal, a few sips of our coffee without distracting ourselves so much. So these are some ways to care for our body through caring for what we eat. We can also try to get better sleep, which I know is really hard for a lot of us. And again, mindfulness can be really helpful here, but when we're anxious, right, the body's afraid to go to sleep because it's afraid something is going to happen, right? Of course, it's not going to want to go to sleep, but we know that sleep is going to help us function. It's going to really lift up our mood a lot. It's going to help our brains work better. I read something a few years ago that was like, for every hour less than 6 hours of sleep you get in it, it's almost like your IQ goes down like 5 or 10 points or something. Plus, we know our moods, we can't regulate ourselves when we're exhausted. So trying to get sleep, just a short little mindful relaxation practice. I'll guide us through this. You can do this yourself. You can remember this. Maybe you want to share this with some folks. It's just a quick little acronym, checking in and relaxing, and like a progressive muscle relaxation. These 4 parts of the body: chest, arms, legs, and mouth. I'll just invite folks, if you feel comfortable, you can let your eyes close. You can just rest them downward. I'll ring my bell. And bring your attention now into C for your chest. Is your heart beating fast or slow? Is your stomach tight or relaxed, uncomfortable or comfortable? Is your breath shallow and fast, or is it deeper? And then try tensing the muscles in your chest and torso, squeeze those, and then just let go. Let the tension fade away, let relaxation flow in. And bring your attention from C for chest to A for arms, just feeling sensations from your shoulders down through your hands. Are your hands dry or damp? Are they still or are they shaking? Just noticing your hands and arms. Try tensing these muscles, just squeezing. Feel the tension and then just release, let go. The relaxation flow in, tension flow out. Follow your awareness, your attention now down into L for your legs, noticing often when we're anxious, our legs are bouncing a little bit or stressed. Let your legs become still. Tense those muscles from your thighs down to your feet. Squeeze. Hold. And release. Let the tension flow out. Relaxation flow in. And lastly, bring your attention up to M for your mouth. I know for me, my jaw is where I tend to hold a lot of tension, stress. Noticing the expression on your face, what it's communicating outward as well as inward right now. And then take a moment to clench your jaw, squeeze your mouth shut. Feel that tension. And then just let go. Let the tension flow out. Relaxation flow in, and just, if it feels natural, just letting your mouth relax just into a slight smile. And just raise your eyes, open your eyes, and just take, before you look back to the screen, just take a look around the room, or even out the window if you've got one. Maybe noticing something beautiful. And then bringing your eyes back again to the screen. CALM, chest, arms, legs, mouth. You can do this for 10 minutes before sleep or for 2 minutes. This is a really helpful practice for anxiety. Anxiety is really in our bodies, right? And it's very hard to be anxious and worried in our minds while our bodies are relaxed. So finding a way to relax our bodies can be very powerful, very helpful to let go of some of that anxiety up in our minds. There's another simple practice, again, that you can do or you can share. I'm happy to share these slides with folks too if you wanna shoot me an email, no problem. And then lastly, one of the things that we can do that's really useful for anxiety, for stress, often for depression as well, sometimes for people that are struggling with self-regulation because of trauma or with impulse control because of around substance abuse or other behaviors, is just shifting our breath a little bit. When we're anxious, our breath tends to be up high in the chest, fast. As we deepen our breath, that actually starts to relax us too. So I like to say, and I heard someone say, I can't remember who, your breath can be like a remote control. It can turn down the volume on that anxiety in your brain and reset your emotions. And so we know that you can regulate your breath. That regulates your body, which regulates your nervous system and your brain. And then we can start to actually regulate our attention, our impulses, and our emotions that much more effectively, just actually by slowing our breath down a little bit. Where do we want our breath to be? Well, we want it to be deeper because actually we have neuroreceptors actually located down deeper in our lungs. So the deeper breaths that we take, that actually signals the body to relax because they're getting the oxygen. And that's a message that says, calm down, you're safe. So many of us not feeling so safe, we can actually turn that on by pressing those buttons deep in our lungs, calming down the entire nervous system. And so just breathing about between 4 and 6 breaths in a minute is what's usually recommended to settle our nervous system so that we can focus, so that we can regulate emotions like anxiety and fear, certainly to regulate our impulses as well, activating those parts of the brain, as well as activating the social part of the brain, so we can connect more effectively with others. So there are a few ways to do this. We can just count. For example, one rhythm that I like, the 7-11 breath, which is easy to remember because 7 and 11, and it's just breathing in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Try breathing in yourself, just counting up to 7. Back out again, counting to 11. Breathing in up to 7. And back out to 11. And you can just let your breath find its own rhythm again. A bit more well-regulated. Again, that well-regulated breath regulates our nervous system, our brain, our emotions, and our impulses. Even within just a few minutes, it cues the body to settle down and feel safe. I could go on and on about the research. I'm working on a new book all about this, but again, this can be really helpful for the stress, for the anxiety, right? For that fear response when it starts to kick in, as well as just feeling overwhelmed, right? And again, a panic attack or something like that, or shame, or uncontrollable grief in a difficult moment. With kids, I work a lot with kids and families. One of my favorite ones that I share with kids, I've written a few kids books, but the hot chocolate breath. And with kids who are feeling overwhelmed, just imagine you're holding a mug of hot chocolate. Right? If it's really hot, you want to exhale, cool it off. Inhale, smell. Blowing out, slowly cooling off. Inhale, smelling. Exhale, cooling off. So that's when I do a fair amount with my own kids. We're now just about 3 and 6. My daughter's going to have two birthdays in the pandemic. So these are a few ways to care more for our bodies so that they can regulate themselves out of a depression, out of anxiety, right? Out of that urge, impulsivity that may be falling into in some ways. And then turning a bit more toward the psychological, right? What's happening in our brains, our thoughts, our cognitions, as we say in the therapy world, right? What we know is that when we are stressed, our perspective gets incredibly distorted. It's useful for survival to start not being able to do any critical thinking when we're stressed out and see the world in black and white ways, to see danger everywhere, whether it's there or not. As humans, we're already wired with a bit of a negativity bias. We see things a bit worse than they are, but under stress, that gets even more magnified. This is why we see so much in the last year, right? People blaming each other, people angry with each other, groups of people blaming each other. We start thinking in polarized ways, and social media certainly doesn't help, right? But really not able to do critical thinking. It's why people falling prey to conspiracy theories. It's because our critical thinking is not working in our brain when we are stressed out, right? And then you add underlying mental health issues perhaps onto this, right? And people really fall apart. So this is where mindfulness can actually just help us to see a bit more clearly, right? Is this really dangerous or is it not? Right? Is this safe or is it not? To have a little bit more discernment, clear seeing. Mindfulness can be so helpful with that. We can also do things like practice gratitude, which I know can sound really corny. But actually what we know about gratitude is that it helps us to see more clearly, to see both the yucky stuff in the world. There's a pandemic, there's racism, there's anti-Semitism, all these things are on the rise, right? There's all this awful stuff going on in the world, and there's vaccines, there's people doing good stuff. It's not pretending that that bad stuff isn't happening, to take time to just look at what are some of the good things happening too. Gratitude and appreciation is linked to lower anxiety, lower depression, better physical health, greater life satisfaction, less aggression and anger, better sleep, and more kindness. Those are things I think we all might want. And to me, it's practiced best with other people, oftentimes. And so I'll just invite you again, just take a moment if you want to lower your eyes and just maybe think back over the last day or two. And just reflecting on maybe one just nice moment that you had. Maybe it was the cup of coffee that you had this morning. Maybe it was seeing friends or connecting with people on Zoom. Maybe it was getting your vaccine. Just one positive thing. Imagine the scene, who was there, how you felt, just taking a moment to let it sink in. And I'll just invite you to then maybe raise your eyes. And I realized, I think I was going to ask us, is the chat box on or off? If you feel comfortable in the chat box, maybe just putting into the chat box, what was that positive thing? I'm just going to put in the beautiful snow, right? Which is not ruined yet. And I'm not sure if the chat box is turned on or off, but I'll put in the chat box. Sometimes I do this in a big group of folks and we can all share. But it's beautiful to hear, right, what else is happening for other folks. Right? Took a walk with my dog, or playing with my kids, right? Those kinds of things. Right? So that gratitude is certainly never diminished by sharing. And again, lifts our mood, makes us less anxious, less depressed. Certainly gratitude practices are a big part of substance abuse recovery as well. Right, so people are starting to put these in. Hearing the birds singing, laughing with a friend on the phone. The birds thing I love. Last April, I guess there's a spike in Google searches of people saying, are the birds louder this year? Which I love that people were looking for that, because the world was quieter. Walking with a colleague, reading in the sunshine through the window, hearing the birds, walking with a colleague, getting our vaccine shot, someone chanting his Haftarah on the anniversary of his bar mitzvah, connecting with a cousin, connecting with some young organizers, the icicles, the elderly cat in the neighborhood, walking my dog, sunshine after a snowstorm, being kind to myself when I was feeling a lot. Right? So many wonderful things that we can share, right? In gratitude. And it doesn't get rid of that bad stuff, but it helps us see there is good stuff. Singing the Kiddush, laughing with my partner, a lovely nurse who gave us a second vaccine, got a massage. Wow, I am jealous of that one. Eating the challah my daughter made. Oh my gosh, we actually just got challah at the grocery store as well with my daughter today. So that's our afternoon plan, sitting in front of the fireplace, right? And then we see everybody else's responses, or you're hearing me share them, right? And it does boost us all up a little bit, right? Strawberries growing indoors. I do this with my kids too. We do roses and thorns every night. My son's like, I want to do 100 roses because he doesn't want to go to bed, but just a few roses, happy things in the day. Right? Got to go sledding with a friend, got to read a favorite book. The library's open again for pickup. A thorn, he got in a fight with his sister. Right? And then we do a bud for tomorrow. What do you hope for tomorrow? I hope we get to go sledding again. Kind of a fire in the fireplace. Connection, morning chant, right? Thank you, everybody, for sharing. So gratitude can help with the psychological, with seeing actually more clearly that there is good along with the bad at the same time. Lastly, I want to talk about community for a little bit as well. That's been hard to find these days. I know at the beginning of the pandemic, I was I made all these like text threads on my phone. It was like, I have my grad school friends. How's everybody doing? And my college friends and my high school friends. We had 2 high school reunions from Newton North, right? We had, like all this stuff online and it's kind of faded out, I have to say, right? But just staying connected on these group chats or WhatsApps or, weekly, again, spiritual connections, doing Shabbat over Zoom, whatever it might look like. These things remain so important. So these kinds of things to stay connected. And to not be alone. Again, some of us are very alone, or we have people in our lives who we worry about how alone they are, right? I encourage people who are alone to reach out twice as much as they think they need to, both when you're down and when you're up, because you actually don't know who you might be lifting up when you reach out and say, how's it going to somebody? Right? These kinds of things, again, finding those online support groups, recovery groups, or anxiety groups, or online meditation groups, online yoga groups, exercise, right? Spiritual gathering, having those Zoom birthday parties, having those Zoom Passovers, right? Having the Zoom game nights with friends. I was doing at the beginning of the pandemic with my family, doing like Lego challenges with my son. And we had like friends in Argentina and friends in Dubai and friends in Italy and friends in California, kind of like with the kids getting together to maintain some kind of community. My writing group feels like a community to me as well, right? So these ways of finding community, because it helps us take perspective being around other people. There's that saying, if your mind is a dangerous neighborhood, don't go there alone, right? It can be, be dangerous sometimes. So it really helps to have community here and in other places. What we miss so often are those, talking to people, saying like, I miss my coworkers, but, we like interact, we have our Zoom meetings, but who I kind of miss is like saying hey to the secretary, or the water cooler talk, or the chit chat before the meeting. There's no chit chat on Zoom. There's no in-between moments. There's no water cooler. And if there was, it'd be so awkward probably, right? In the workplace, those are what keep us alive and human and social. Those are really important. And so figuring out, is there a way to replace those? How can we replace those? Right? If there aren't people, can we take care of our plants? Actually, having plants. Ellen Langer, who's a positive psychologist, basically at Harvard, the first woman in the psych department to get tenure. She had this study about like plants make us happier to have around. And older folks and people on their own live longer and are healthier when they have plants to take care of. Same with pets, right? Not all of us are great at connecting to other humans. At the same time, being aware also of the kinds of people we're spending time with. There's another saying, right? If you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, consider who you choose. And of course, some of us get to choose who those 5 people we're in a pod with. You can hear my family upstairs that just got home. I'm very grateful to my family, by the way, but I know some people, they don't get to choose who they live with. That can be tough. Or online, you're the average of the 5 people who probably post the most in your Facebook feed, and maybe those aren't always the people that are, doing so well. We know, right? People who are a bit more negative or a bit more conspiratorial. You can just hide those people. I do it a lot. It really makes going on social media more pleasant. I also take long social media breaks too. Took about 2 months off this summer. I'm probably gonna do it again in a little bit. I just took Facebook off my phone just to slow myself down from, I never feel that much better when I look at social media, right? Setting boundaries is another really important aspect of self-care. I saw someone online said something that was like, taking bubble baths and lighting candles is one form of self-care, but setting healthy boundaries with people who overstep our boundaries or are really needy or demanding, that's actually another form of self-care, right? So remembering, that, there's some people that bring us down or whatever it might be, and setting healthy boundaries. Right? Saying I can't talk now, but maybe later, or just maybe cutting them out in some other ways or reducing their impact on us. That's really important to do for our mental health, our physical health, our clear thinking. I have a few really wonderful questions in the chat I want to get to also. Thank you. I'm not going to mention people by name, but I want to get to your question. Blocking negativity online, thinking about, where we read our news from, and setting positive and negative boundaries. And some people are asking a little bit online, for those of us with depression, gratitude can feel really hard. And I really don't want it to feel like a chore. And I really don't want it to feel like, a term I've seen more recently is this idea of toxic positivity. It's really not that, pretending things are good when they're not, or like there's a silver lining to everything. Some things really just are really hard. And when we are depressed, it is really, really hard to find those things. I really want to acknowledge that for folks that are really struggling. And I think, sometimes when I'm having a hard time, or the clients I work with, come like, there's really not a lot that I'm looking forward to or that has felt good. It's even just like, well, what were some of the more tolerable moments? Right? Maybe it's this conversation with me, your therapist. Maybe it's looking out the window. Maybe it's just that it didn't rain. Right? And I know that, we're all in different places, but I think when we're able to recognize even those smaller moments, it can be helpful and give us something to live for, to look forward to, right? Time with our pets or watering our plants, these kinds of things. It's also one of the things about our social lives is that they can bring us up or they can bring us down. And especially in this pandemic, I feel like there's so much doom and gloom. And, I remember sometime last summer, it was like the Times or the Washington Post had some article that was like, how to have a conversation that's about anything besides the pandemic, which I thought was actually really great. It was like, ask people, for a sourdough recipe, ask people, where they're taking walks in nature, ask people what they're reading, what they're watching, right? Like, let's have conversations that are about other things, or even to remain future focused on the positive. Another positive psychology piece of research, if you plan a vacation, even if you never take it, you feel better for a few days. It lifts your mood just a little bit, right? So, thinking, like daydreaming about where you'll go, because this will end. We don't know when exactly, but we know that it will, right? Looking to the future, what restaurant might you go back to when this is over? Which friends might you have over for a barbecue this summer after everyone's vaccinated? Right? Where might you take a vacation? Right? Even if you never take it, these kinds of things can lift us up just a little bit. And I think also for those of us who are alone, it's very isolating, and it's very hard to get that momentum back up of connecting, right? Not wanting to feel too needy, reaching out, right? Are people ignoring me? Are people rejecting me? This is actually where Cognitive therapy is really helpful. Like, because you reach out and you don't get a response, when we're depressed, we tend to think it's because they don't like me, right? We can think of 20 reasons why, they're not reaching out. And usually it's because of something personal about us. We take it as a rejection. But learning to practice entertaining, maybe they're actually just really busy, right? Maybe they're in the middle of something. And it might be both might be true, but learning to expand that there may be other possibilities there too. And then also finding like-minded communities online can be very helpful as well. I'm seeing some kind of cool questions here popping up too. I also just want to talk a little bit, and I want to add, I know I'm actually starting to get more questions than I can respond to. Feel free to email me, feel free to call me. Actually email me, don't call me. I'll never be able to answer my phone. Feel free to email me if you have further questions. I'm happy to offer some ideas or make some referrals or anything if you're interested. I'll put my email up at the end. The other things we can do, and this actually someone's asking about internal versus external locus of control. One of the things we really don't feel like we have a lot of is any control over our lives. Things are very unpredictable right now, getting more predictable. But we develop post-traumatic stress when things are unpredictable and when we feel helpless. But if we make things a bit more predictable, or if we act in ways that are helpful to others, that actually helps us feel more empowered in our own lives. So I'm a big believer in rituals and routines because they mark the day. So it's not Blur's day every day, as people have been saying. That becomes important. But at the beginning of the pandemic, again, as a parent, people posting all these things like, here's your homeschool schedule, right? You're going to be like doing math at 9 a.m. and then, like writing up recipes for your English class. And then you're going to be doing yoga all together. And, then 2 days after that, everyone's posting like, here's the real family home school schedule. It's like 9 a.m. Everyone wake up on the couch, 10 o'clock, everyone, eat potato chips for breakfast, and, 10:30 to 3 o'clock, everyone, play Minecraft for 4 hours. And we can have something in between to make our days a little bit more predictable, which actually really helps us to feel safer and more contained when things are predictable. So first this, then that, right? And I think continuing to get together as a community, right, as TBZ really seems to be doing, which is incredible. Continuing to honor holidays and traditions, I think is so incredibly important because it marks time and also marks who we are as a community, as well as individuals. And I think it was important that we did, again, just thinking about kids, like we did Halloween this year, right? Even if it was socially distanced. And knowing that, it's like, I remember at Halloween, like, so if everyone got the candy shoots, right? And thinking that's actually something that's going to outlast. Like there's just something that started in this pandemic that's actually, we'll probably keep doing candy shoots, right? So keeping rituals and routines, it helps us feel less out of control. We can't predict the next 6 months. We can't predict the next 6 weeks. If we can, for ourselves, for our families, for the folks that we care about, make even the next 6 hours predictable so that we know what's coming in our day, that actually feels really containing, alleviates anxiety, takes the energy, when we're depressed, it just feels like I have no energy for anything, let alone planning dinner, let alone planning that. So having even a little bit of a frame to our day just makes it a little bit easier to get through sometimes and have those rhythms and things that perhaps we look forward to. And we can also find ways to stay connected. It sounds like, a lot of folks I saw in the gratitude chat kind of coming through with wonderful kinds of service work, caring for other folks in the community. When we feel helpless, we can try to be helpful, right? Mr. Rogers' mom said, right, look for the helpers. We can look for the helpers with gratitude. We can also be the helpers to feel a part of a community. Getting groceries for somebody else from the community, right? Teaching a friend how to cook, bringing food over for folks. Right? When I thought about who do I want to be at the beginning of the pandemic, it was like, do I want to be the guy that takes the last roll of toilet paper? Or do I want to be the guy that like texts my neighbor and says, hey, I'm braving it and going to the grocery store. Can I get you anything? That's who I want to be. That's who I want my kids to see. And it also, we know that acts of kindness like that make us feel better, build up our own self-esteem by doing esteemable acts, right? And bringing more joy, bringing more help into the world, right? So, and at the same time, what we do as we do these things, whether it's helping our neighbors or, writing inspirational quotes in chalk or on rocks and leaving them around the neighborhood, right? We're also not just helping ourselves feel better and more empowered, we're actually making the community itself tighter knit, closer, right? We've been living in this house for a year before the pandemic hit, right? And suddenly we got to know our neighbors. Everyone's out in the street wearing masks, 6 feet apart, right? But like we had multiple socially distanced block parties and really getting to know people, building community, helping each other out, right? Can you watch our house while we're out of town? Can you pick up some food, right? What can we do for you? Right? These ways we start to build a stronger community, right? And we also feel empowered in our own lives. This idea of internal versus external locus of control. External locus of control is when we feel like we can't do anything, we feel disempowered. Martin Seligman, who's a positive psychologist now, he was not very positive when he began, talks about learned helplessness. That's what a lot of us feel. We're kind of giving up. Right? It's what Viktor Frankl said we shouldn't do, right? We have to find that meaning. That's also a big part of how, right, we then start to recover. We feel that personal sense of empowerment, find meaning in life. And, one of the things that when you ask people who've been through difficult times, what it was that got them through, it is so often one of the top answers is being a part of something bigger, finding something meaningful. And there's negative ways to do that, and there's positive ways to do that. But what's beautiful about a community like this, especially a spiritual community, is that we can actually support each other and come together around the positive to do something more meaningful. So I want to, oh my gosh, is that my old professor who just chatted me? Oh my goodness. So here are a few ideas for you, a few ideas for your family, a few ideas for folks that you worry about, a few ideas for the community at large as well, for what are some of the things that we can start to do to care for ourselves in terms of our mental health, a few little tips, right? Around mindfulness, around anxiety, around depression, around substance abuse, around, even, post-traumatic stress, or, worrying about developing post-traumatic stress, right? But when we come together like this, we're actually really being resilient, and we're actually keeping those things at bay. And for some folks that have chatted me, I feel like very emotional. For some folks that have chatted me, still feeling very isolated and alone. It's really powerful to be here and just see actually how we might feel alone, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we are. And when we are depressed, our brain tells us that we are alone, we're isolated, but we in fact are not. Right? We are surrounded with 80-something other folks in a wonderfully supportive community. So thank you all again for being here. Thank you again for hosting me. I could talk for 4 more hours, which is what I do for a living. But this has been a really sweet time for me. And I'll put in the box if you want to get in touch, if you want a copy of the slides. I've got these here, but again, I want to thank everybody, especially the leaders behind the scene of the community. It takes a lot of work to put on these events. And so I just am grateful to all the work that went on behind the scenes to make this happen. Judy and Danya and Mara and Claudia and the Ruderman Foundation and everybody else who I did not meet behind the scenes. So thank you all so much. Oh, folks from Argentina. Oh. I post this on my Instagram, so people from all over the place tuning in.
Willard, thank you so very much. We really all appreciate your experience and knowledge that you've brought to us and our community. And we're grateful for the calm that you brought, both in the specific activities and just in who you are. And just a huge thanks to you for joining us and enriching our community. I also want to thank Molly and the Ruderman Foundation for supporting all that we do. And a huge shout out to Sue Brent, my co-chair, and our whole inclusion committee. So thank you, Sue. And thank you to everybody for joining us. And just a couple of things I want to mention very quickly. For those of you who's been here all morning, I'm sure you're eager to go. But we have resources under the inclusion tab on the TBC website, and I've included them in the chat. You can also go to TBC Brookline Online. And I also just want to remind you that our Chesed community is very, very active. For those of you looking for helpers, and for those of you who wish to be helpers, thanks to Amy and all of her work in that. So please reach out to Chesed. Feel free to reach out to Inclusion with any questions. And want to remind you that our own Nishmat Chaim is available, TBC's Breath of Life meditation project, every Friday at 9:30 if people are interested. Reb Moshe is always available for more if you have more questions about that. And if any of you are interested in getting more involved in inclusion initiatives, either email us or stay on. I'll be staying in the Zoom room for a few minutes. If you have any questions or looking for resources or wishing to become more involved. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Shabbat Shalom and be well.
Shabbat Shalom. Reb Moshe, can you unmute yourself? Looks like you want to say something.
Yeah. I just wanted to thank you, of course, very much. I know you're a Newton boy, so that's really good to have someone from the hometown up there. And just wanted to say that if 9:30 on Friday doesn't work for people, we have a very good Sangha. We have a Sangha of about 20 to 25 people who meet every week. It's much easier, as I think Dr. Willard said, to sometimes do this together. I could not sit 40 minutes, but with a group, you get a lot of good energy. Now, if anybody says, I can't do that time because I work, let us know, because I've been really eager to try to find another time where another 20 or 25 people might be able to join together. So don't be shy. Let us know what you need. And again, thank you and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.